All right, Jimmy, Ott Paul Stone talking some college hoops with you. Now, listen, these lines are projected. We'll give you some qualifiers. We'll say, up to this point or that point. But, at this point in the season, these lines are baked in pretty good, but they can be tricky. Now, we're talking about the opening lines. They will certainly move, but let's get right to them, Paul, and let's let's start off with the SEC and your alma mater, the Texas Longhorns going to take it on the Georgia Bulldogs in Austin. And, Texas a couple of games ago had as good of a back to back wins as there was, man, maybe since Gonzaga, maybe not Gonzaga, but Michigan out in Las Vegas when they routed Gonzaga and beat some other teams as well. But they went to Alabama, and that's a tough place to win. And not only did they win, they didn't win on a half court buzzer beater and won comfortably in Tuscaloosa. Now, Alabama's not quite as good as they've been the last couple of years. Maybe their G League new addition will fix that, but that's a good win. And then they came back home and blew out then undefeated Vandy. Is a little bit of that shine worn off with Vandy now losing three in a row? Maybe so, a little bit, but still, they're a tough team to figure out for me. Georgia, on the other hand, we've talked about Georgia and Mike White. Mike White, kind of when the seat was getting warm in Gainesville, he secured another SEC job in Athens at Georgia. Number one scoring team in the country. They go 11 deep with their rotation. At least 11 players play average double digit minutes, and they love to get up and down. They're athletic. They lead the country. 365 teams in blocks as well. And man, that game at Missouri was a tricky one. Missouri was embarrassed. They lost in Baton Rouge to LSU. That was LSU's first conference win of the season. And they go on the road to Columbia, and it was nip and tuck, back and forth. Columbia did a good job of slowing down the pace and making it there a half court pace. And then down was Missouri down two. They hit a three with 10 seconds to go. But Georgia, really good possession. Kid, they undersized guard, they called Smurf, drew the foul, got the and one, and Georgia wins on the road. Any win on the road in this conference is really tough in the SEC. So now they go to Austin. Texas is a slight favorite here at 1.5. Texas lost at Kentucky at Rupp during the week. Georgia, we talked about it, goes to Columbia and beats Missouri there. Texas 1.5 here at home. Paul, help us figure out these Longhorns.
Yeah, they're tough to figure out. I mean, obviously, a lot of teams in college basketball, are up and down and inconsistent, and Texas certainly falls in that range. We're almost certain in this spot this weekend, Saturday in Austin, to have that dynamic of an unranked team being favored over a ranked team. That's an angle that's been really profitable through the years. It's certainly cooled down a little bit the last season and a half, but certainly still something to consider there. As you mentioned, under first-year head coach Sean Miller, Texas is a team that can be quite good at its best, but has struggled to be consistent. They open play in SEC at 0-2. Then they go to Alabama, rally to defeat the Crimson Tide by 4 points, defeat a good basketball team. Like you said, maybe not their very best rendition in recent years for Alabama, but still ranked 13th. So a good victory there. And then they back it up by beating then undefeated Vanderbilt and 10th ranked Vanderbilt, beat them by 15 points, 16 points actually there in Austin, just a dominant performance. But now they've kind of come back to earth. They host Texas A&M this past weekend in Austin, and the Aggies are playing really pressure defense, as you would expect under their new first-year head coach, Bucky McMillan. And Bucky Ball really gave the Longhorns trouble. They just couldn't get in a rhythm offensively. Didn't look good at all. The Aggies, they don't beat the Longhorns very often in Austin. That was their first victory over Texas since 2002. And prior to that, they hadn't won in Austin since the 1980s. So a big win for the Aggies there, going to Austin, defeating the Longhorns. And then last night on Wednesday, the 21st, Texas goes to Lexington, plays Kentucky. Had a solid effort. I mean, they fouled too much and didn't get the key stops, really. It was defense which hurt them probably most of all. But they lose to Kentucky 85-80. And now they're coming back home to play Georgia, 21st ranked Georgia team. Desperately need a win to keep their NCAA tournament aspirations alive. This is a Georgia team, I think, that's been a pleasant surprise. We've talked about the fact that it's very difficult in today's age of the transfer portal, where these basketball teams are turning over, in some cases, their entire starting five. But Georgia was picked to finish 14th in the SEC in the preseason poll. They are 16-3. They've been better at home, like all teams, virtually all teams. They've been better at home than on the road. They played 3 conference road games to this point. They lost by 15 at Florida, which there's no shame in that. Florida is as good as about anybody in the country. And then they trailed in the second half at South Carolina and Missouri, as you mentioned, rallied to win those games by 5 and 2 points respectively. Again, Texas needs a win. I think they're going to get it by 2 or more. I like the Longhorns over the Bulldogs Saturday in Austin.
Sean Miller's been around the block. I mean, he's a veteran coach, and I think he understands. You saw the graphic right there, the breakdown, kind of the tail of the tape, and the Ken Palm up tempo. Georgia, and Mike White. This is not his typical style to just get this frantic pace. But number one in pace of play and tempo, and that's just not what Texas wants to do. So I think that the one thing that Missouri did win, they won the battle of tempo. It's much easier to slow it down than it is to speed it up. Thinking about first year coaches, the buckyball coming over from Sanford, and they press after miss shots. So I mean, they are giving a lot of people a different look, an unusual look that they're not used to. Bet Rivers is giving out college basketball profit boosts from 20 to 50% throughout the week for live wagers on Tuesday, same game parlays on Wednesday, and regular parlays on Thursday. See the Bet Rivers app for more details. So from some first-year coaches to another first-year coach. And what about the job that young Ryan Odom is doing at Virginia? Well, they are really, really good. And the Virginia people are well aware of who he was, because when they were the number one seed, they lost to a 16th seed, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I think Paul, as you talked to before the airtime, and the relievers, and he ran into a bunch of relievers out in Las Vegas for March Madness one time. But yes, he engineered that upset victory before he went to Logan, Utah, coach Utah State, and then VCU, and now he's in his first year of Virginia. It's interesting. The first 3 of their 6 in their rotation are freshmen. So interesting, but they do everything pretty damn well. 84 points a game. That's not your typical Tony Bennett type of team. So it's much, much more high scoring team. Assist to turnover ratio is near the top in the nation. Block shots. We just talked about Georgia, number 1 in block shots. Virginia is number 2. Ralph Sampson's long gone. 6.5 blocks a game. That is a lot. So, man, they have a whole week off after road wins last week at Louisville and SMU, including their leading scorer, I'm sorry, one of their starters, who went 0 for 8 from 3 in Dallas. So 2 real quality games. Now they're at home. It's a little higher than normal. There's no doubt. 8.5 against North Carolina. North Carolina gets right against Notre Dame at home after a rough Bay Area swing where they lost both games to Stanford and Cal. But something about North Carolina, Virginia, they're just not going to take anything for granted here. They want a piece of North Carolina. They got the upper hand. 8.5 is a little bit, but man, Virginia is so much better, so much more consistent, so much more mature than North Carolina. Even with they play smart basketball, even with 3 of their first 6 in as freshmen. In North Carolina, Dean Smith, boy, what would he think of this? They're near the bottom of the country in free throw percentage. Anyway, I'm taking the Wahoos, Cavaliers, minus 8.5 at home in Charlottesville.
Yeah, we talk about, oftentimes in sports, how difficult it is to follow a legend. And I think Tony Bennett, the job that he did at the University of Virginia, he qualifies as such. I mean, just one of obviously the greatest coaches in that program's history. But as you mentioned, Ryan Odom has come in. It's a different style of play. It's a different look, but the results are quite similar to this point. I can confidently say, in my opinion, at this point, that Virginia is the best team in the ACC, not named Duke, and they are really good. They're a team that could, clearly make some noise in the NCAA tournament. They're a team that's been good on the road, which to me is the kind of the signal that a team is capable of doing great things. Gone into places like Texas and Louisville, won comfortably at Texas, won by 9 at Louisville. So this is a really good Virginia team. North Carolina, on the other hand, they're 15-4, but I don't know. It's not a very inspiring 15-4, in my opinion, to this point. They've dropped. You mentioned the bay swing this past weekend where they lose to both Stanford and Cal, and they've actually lost all 3 of their ACC road games. Before that, they lost to SMU in Dallas by about 15 and just outplayed totally by the Ponies in that one. I think the Wahoos are going to go. They're going to welcome North Carolina into their place, and I think they're going to beat them by double digits. I just don't see this as being a competitive game down to the wire. I think Virginia is clearly better than North Carolina, and I think, again, they win by double digits.
All right, Paul, let's get to one of your picks here. Let's get to the Big 12 and Baylor, the Baylor Bears, and another coach with a national championship. And by the way, Ryan Odom is the son of longtime basketball coach Dave Odom. So a little pedigree in his game as well. The Baylor Bears have lost their last 3 in Waco by double digits, including this week against Texas Tech. They came in there, and it was never close. It was double digits pretty much throughout the entire game. TCU, on the other hand, I'm trying to figure them out. How good are they? I mean, they went to Fog Allen and lost a tough one, blew a 15-point second half lead, and that was with Kansas' best player, the projected lottery pick playing in that game, who's been in and out of the lineup all year long. TCU, a plus 4.5 is what we're projecting this line at. We wonder if it would move any after a disappointing loss again at home at Waco. But again, Bears have lost all 3 at home. TCU catching points here in Waco.
Yeah, it seems kind of odd to look at the Big 12 standings this morning, Jimmy, and see Baylor in a 4-way tie for last place at 1-5. TCU only a game better at 2-4 in the Big 12 to this point. But this is a tough league. These are not bad basketball teams. Their conference records to this point, to me, demonstrate more than anything else just the top to bottom balance of the Big 12. Utah and Kansas State, they're a little bit down. They're not world beaters, but for the most part, there are no easy outs in the Big 12. This is the second meeting between these teams. They squared off in the conference opener for both 3 weeks ago in Fort Worth. TCU prevailed in that game 69 to 63. But in that game, TCU, they led by double digits in most of the second half, actually in front by 14 with just over 5 minutes to go before Baylor started a run, closed the gap to 4 points with 2:22 remaining. TCU, again, holds on for the 6-point victory there in Fort Worth. And now this is the second meeting of the year. Looking at Baylor, Scott Drew, their longtime coach, he has experienced a lot of success in Waco, certainly highlighted by the program winning their first national championship back in 2021 when they beat Gonzaga for all the marbles. But clearly, to put it mildly, this is not one of his better teams. Defensively, that's where really they're playing at a surprisingly low level. They rank only an uncharacteristic 115th in defensive efficiency there at Ken Palm. Just not a very good Baylor basketball team. Then you look at TCU. This is a team that beat both Florida and Wisconsin on a neutral site and led Michigan there in Fort Worth through much of the second half. They eventually lost that game 67-63, but Michigan, one of the better teams in the country, in Fort Worth, and TCU actually had an opportunity to beat them there in Fort Worth. This past weekend, TCU stubbed their toe in Salt Lake City, went there to play Utah, lost that game 82-79. They've now lost 3 straight on the road in their previous 2 road games, though. And you mentioned one of them, went to Kansas a few games ago, led by 15 points in that game with 8 minutes to go. As you mentioned, Peterson did play for Kansas in that game, eventually lose to the Jayhawks in overtime. Then after that, they went to Provo to play BYU, and they lead by 9 early in the second half and ultimately lose by only 6 at BYU, a very good BYU team. So this TCU team, again, they're kind of hard to figure, but at their best, they're very good. I think this is going to be a competitive game. I think TCU is going to take it down to the wire. They've been very good as an underdog this year. Fairly limited sample size, but they are 5-1 against the spread as a dog. They will be getting points. I like TCU plus the 4.5, and we'll probably take them down to about plus 3.5. But I think they're going to go into Waco, give Baylor all they can handle this weekend.
All right, let's stay at the Big 12 and top the standings here. Now, Arizona is undefeated, so of course they're undefeated in league play as well at 6-0. But Houston is tied for the lead at 6-0. Texas Tech is right behind them, 5-1. Texas Tech their only Big 12 loss was a 4-point loss at Houston, covered easily in Hoffa in the new Fertitta Center. So I almost said Hoffa's Pavilion, but anyway, they lost by 4. They're very respectable. At Lubbock, they are tough, 10-0. And boy, Toppin, it seemed like a one man band early. He was really having to carry a big bulk of the load against a team that should have been in the Final Four. But that was a brutal loss. As they led for most of the game against eventual national champion of Florida in the Elite Eight. But anyway, the Texas Tech, they have found some help. They are in the top 10 in the country out of 365 D1 teams in 3-point percentage. So, man, with top and down low, one of the best rebounders in the country. As far as the top leagues, he is the best rebounder in the country. The kid from Florida is way up there as well with he's having an unbelievable rebound surge in Gainesville. But Texas Tech at home here, light line, we're projecting it to be -1.5. So, look, Houston, rarely are they a dog. We get that. But something about this Kelvin Sampson team, which is always a given, and that they are going to rebound and they're going to defend, kind of two places that the Givens, I don't think they're quite as suffocating on defense and quite as tough on the boards. Texas Tech is actually a better rebounding team than the Houston Cougars this year. Now they have more firepower. Another place where that's happening is Knoxville with Rick Barnes' crew. Always a given. Defending and rebounding, not quite as much. More firepower than usual, but still. But anyway, here, Spot, I saw them play. And the other thing is that Houston, certainly with their style of play, can kind of intimidate the opponent sometimes. Texas Tech clearly showed they were not intimidated, and that was on the road. Now at Lubbock, light number here. I'd lay up to 2.5, 3. I'm taking the Red Raiders at home where they're undefeated to maintain, to stay undefeated and make it 11-0 in the season, -1.5, 2 at home against the Houston Cougars.
Yeah, these teams actually, this is their second meeting as well this year, and they met in Houston earlier this month. The Red Raiders led that game for most of the game's final 13 minutes. The Cougars rallied late, got a hard-fought 69-65 victory. We talked, I think, last week at this time about Texas Tech's underrated, in our opinion, home court advantage there at United Supermarkets Arena. They have a raucous crowd. They are very difficult out there in Lubbock. Grant McCasland, now in his third season as head coach since coming over from North Texas, since his arrival there in Lubbock, they are 40-5 at United Supermarkets. So they are tough to beat in Lubbock. And as you mentioned, man, when you talk about the Red Raiders, it starts with JT Toppin, the New Mexico transfer, reigning Big 12 Player of the Year, returning first-team All-America, just a big-time player who can score from 20 feet in, basically. For me, it would be the Red Raiders or nothing. But I'm kind of afraid of Kelvin Sampson, even though, as you said, and I totally agree, and think most people who follow college basketball closely agree as well. This Houston team to this point, not quite as good as some of the Cougar additions of the last few years. You talked about the defense not quite as suffocating. They just don't seem to be quite as good. But, of course, that's relative to a very high standard. I'm not going to step in the Red Raiders, but I'm not going to get in front of Mr. Sampson either. This guy, like him, love him, or loathe him. Boy, Kelvin Sampson can coach a little hoop, but it's going to be crazy in Lubbock. They're going to be looking for their quote-unquote revenge from the earlier loss, and they were very impressive in Houston in the first meeting.
Look, the evolution of college sports and the player-coach relationship is pretty clear. I mean, there's a lot of coaches out there in college basketball, football, whatever, that are just afraid to really get after and coach their players in fear of losing them, and transferring out. Make no mistake, he has a culture where he can coach at Houston. Just that more firepower, and sometimes when you try and get over that hump because they've been so close, and that's been their biggest weakness. They could go through some scoring droughts. Maybe you kind of lose what got you there in trying to get over that hump. It happens sometimes. Let's go to the Big East right now and look at the Georgetown Providence games. A couple of 9 and 10 teams here. This will be a Saturday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern tip. TNT, the Turner Broadcasting System, bringing you a lot more college basketball after losing the NBA contract to ESPN and NBC. And I got burned on Georgetown this week, Paul. So, and their biggest Achilles here, their inability to score sometimes is really it was a downer this past week as they just had a tough time scoring against Villanova, losing 66 to 51. I thought Cooley was kind of getting his team into form a little bit with some really competitive games against Connecticut and Creighton. So, but they failed to cover this past week. During the week, rather, against Villanova. Providence were projected to be a 7.5 point favorite over the Hoyas.
Yeah, at 9 and 10 on the season, and now only 1 and 7 in Big East play after the defeat that you mentioned. Georgetown almost certainly destined to finish in the second division of the Big East. But that doesn't mean, as sports bettors, that we throw the Hoyas in the scrap pile, so to speak, and forget about them. Besides, the point spread, can be the great equalizer, and some of the best teams to back at the betting window can be the ones with losing records, subpar records, so to speak. Obviously, Georgetown coming off of a subpar showing, but sometimes I like to buy low, so to speak. Buy when a team is coming off of inferior performance. Georgetown obviously is going to be based on their talent level and kind of where they are in college basketball's pecking order and the pecking order of the Big East. They're gonna lay some stinkers. They're gonna have some bad outings, and last night was certainly one. But this time of the season, I'm constantly looking for teams that maybe don't appear bright and shiny to the naked eye, but that are competitive and put up a good fight, rather, night in and night out. Georgetown, they've now lost 7 straight in conference play. Nothing very positive about that, but they've been in virtually every one of those games, lost 5 of those games by single digits, 3 of those games by 3 or fewer points. And in some Big East games, I mean, there's no other way to put it. Georgetown, even though they've got a chance to win the game, they are punching up in class. We've talked about their offensive lack of firepower during on this podcast in the past, and we were talking about it earlier today. They don't have a great offensive team, and sometimes they're simply punching up in weight class when they're going up against the UConns of the Big East, the St. John's rather of the Big East. And not that Providence, not that they haven't shown spurts, not that they haven't shown flashes. They have defeated both St. John's and Creighton on their home floor this year. So the Friars certainly capable, but at 9 and 10 overall and 2 and 6 in league play, this is a game that Georgetown, I think, is going to have circled. This is a game that they feel like they can win. Providence, they have failed to cover all 3 of their games this year as the betting favorite in the Big East. I think Georgetown's going to keep it. Providence is going to win, but I think Georgetown is going to keep it close. I like the Hoyas plus 7.5 to keep it close again against the Friars.
All right, let's stay in the Big East and one of my selections here and talking about those Turner sisters. This will be a 5 o'clock Eastern tip on True TV. So they got that Turner Big East contract. Seton Hall were projected to be a 3.5 point favorite at DePaul. Now, the Hall and Shaheen Holloway's crew, the Pirates, they were 4-1 in conference play and have lost their last 3, but minus the Butler game where they really were flat and just kind of just kind of never in it, really. Lose by 11 at home to Butler, but sandwiched around. Very competitive game against UConn. They covered that one, losing 69-64. Came down to the end. And then at St. John's, where they led for most of the game in New York against the Johnnies, losing 65-60. They need a win right now. So I don't think they're going to sleepwalk into anything right now in this trip to Chicago. So I think a light number here. I think this is a tournament team when it's all said and done. 14-5 overall, 4-4 in the league. And look, DePaul is improved. There's no question about it. They have been really, really down and are 11-8 overall. And in conference play, the Blue Demons are 3-5, but I just think the stronger team here needing a win. Not worried about them being kind of taking it for granted and sort of digging themselves a hole because they're not focused early. I think Shaheen's going to have his team ready to play. I'm taking the Pirates on the road here, minus a small number.
Yeah, I'll piggyback your thoughts on Seton Hall. This is a team I think that's going to make the NCAA tournament, and they're a desperate team. And I like to play teams this time of the season that really need a win to get back on the right foot. This is a team that's lost 3 straight Big East games, as you mentioned, St. John's, Butler, and UConn, some really good basketball teams. They obviously need to go to Chicago, defeat DePaul to bolster their NCAA tournament resume. And one thing that they lean on, under Shaheen Holloway, they're going to play pesky in-your-face defense. They currently rank 10th, according to Ken Palm, in defensive efficiency, rank 8th nationally in scoring defense, give up a little bit under 64 points a game, rank among the top dozen nationally in opponents' effective field goal percentage. So they're gonna take that defense. Travels better than offense. Probably, I think most of us agree with that statement in basketball. So this is a team that's going to play good defense. I think they're going to go on the road. I like where you're going here. I think they're going to beat DePaul by half dozen or more points.
All right, let's shift off to a mid-major conference here, and let's go down to the Southland. Stephen F. Austin making the trip to Beaumont, Texas, to take on Lamar. And so the look at the Southland Conference the last couple of years has been dominated by McNeese State. Will Wade went there in the 2 years. They won the regular season championship and the conference tournament and got a couple of bids into the NCAA tournament. Upset Clemson last year in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But McNeese is at 8-2, is not leading the conference right now. That's Stephen F. Austin at 9-1. 9-1. So they travel to Beaumont to take on Lamar here at 5-5. Paul, it's one of your selections here.
Yeah, I'm going to start by saying, looking at Joe Lenardi's latest version of bracketology there on ESPN, I think he still has both Stephen F. Austin and McNeese State in the tournament. In the Southland Conference, they're not getting 2 teams in the tournament. And McNeese State, even though this is a really good SFA team, I think they're the best team in the conference. McNeese State has the huge advantage of every year having the conference tournament there in Lake Charles on their home floor. And you might know this story or the reasoning better than I, but I think they've gotten over the last several years overtures from a couple of different conferences to leave the Southland, and as kind of a carrot to stay, the Southland said, hey, we'll give you the Southland Conference tournament for the next 6-8 years, whatever the term is. So they're playing there in Lake Charles. So Stephen F. Austin ultimately will have to go to Lake Charles, Louisiana, and win the Southland Conference tournament. But first things first, we could debate talking about the big leagues that we primarily focus on. We could debate whether the SEC or the Big Ten is the best conference in the nation. Certainly the Big 12 would like a word. They're right up there as well. ACC and Big East not far behind. But a much greater percentage of college basketball teams, the 365 teams that play Division I basketball, they compete in the non-power leagues, such as the Southland Conference. There's some really good basketball played in these leagues, some really good teams through the years. And 2, the money's just as green. And we're able to, if you're able to cash a ticket and get back to the betting window in the Southland Conference and some of these other leagues as the major leagues. So we certainly don't want to overlook these type of conferences. I think when ardent college basketball fans think of Stephen F. Austin State University, which is nestled in the piney woods of East Texas, there in Nacogdoches, Texas, they probably flash back to 6 seasons ago when the Lumberjacks strolled into Cameron Indoor Stadium. They were only getting 27.5 points against top-ranked Duke that night, but they stunned the Blue Devils 85-83. One of the biggest upsets in contemporary college basketball history, ended the Blue Devils' 150-game non-conference home winning streak, the brightest moment in the history of Stephen F. Austin basketball. This year's Stephen F. Austin team might not generate those types of headlines, might not generate that type of publicity, but they are really good. They enter this weekend with a 16-3 overall record. They hold the one-game lead in the Southland over McNeese State, as you mentioned. McNeese State, you'll know, and many of the listeners will remember, upset Clemson in the opening round of last year's NCAA tournament as a 7.5-point underdog, a big victory for McNeese State and their former coach, Will Wade, now at NC State. SFA, they certainly probably haven't captured maybe the collective attention of the betting public. Don't look now, but the Lumberjacks 14-3 against the spread this year. So they've really been a moneymaker at the betting window. I'm going to ride the hot hand. I'm going to take Stephen F. Austin over Lamar. We project them as a 5.5-point favorite over the Cardinals. I like SFA to win by 6 or more over Lamar.
Yeah, it was 2014 when Stephen F. Austin advanced to the Sweet 16 under now Illinois head coach Brad Underwood. So yeah, they have a little bit of a history and down at Stephen F. Austin. Yeah, and the whole McNeese thing, it was, there was it was a oh, no, I guess I don't know it was a polite parting of the ways, with Wade and McNeese. He appreciated him getting him back into coaching after his show clause, and they also he they were they let him handpick his successor, and it was his former assistant at LSU and Bill Armstrong. So some of the same donors that are contributing to his NIL budget and things like that. So they're pretty good. But Stephen F. Austin, it's noticeable that they are beating them right there in that league. They were pretty good, and they're no stranger to winning basketball games in that league. Let's get to our final pick right now, and I'm usually I don't know, 2/3, 75% dog player, but man, this BYU Utah thing has my attention. So BYU, the Big 12 is loaded this year, no doubt. We talked about Arizona. We talked about again with Texas Tech and Houston and some others as well. Iowa State is outstanding. BYU is just one game back of the leaders, Houston and in Arizona, with a 5-1 record in conference play. Their first loss, no embarrassment there, at Lubbock last Saturday. They had the whole week off. Kind of weird that Virginia had the week off midweek and before their game against North Carolina. I'm going with another team that has the entire week off. Maybe a little hungry, maybe a little extra time to think about that loss, but also think about a highly competitive game in Salt Lake City against their heated rival, Utah. It was only 89-84. Utah easily covering the number there. It was right around double digits. So Utah covering it easily. And one thing about it, and I gave out Nebraska. I said I was just going to ride that. I know it's an inflated number. Well, laying 10.5 or 11.5, a 6-0 run to end the game, backdoored this past week on Wednesday night against Nebraska by the Washington Huskies. If you're ever in Utah and talk to a BYU fan or a Utah fan, they don't like each other a whole lot. They hate each other, to be quite frank. They're not pulling the plug when they get up on this game. It's going to have to be way worse than the number here. So 18.5, it's a big number. I get it. But the close game, coming off of a loss, a whole week to think about it, just a spot here for BYU that laid on a little extra thick against the undermanned Utes, their heated rival. Give me BYU as our final pick this week against Utah.
Yeah, I'll start out by saying, giving you a little affirmation to your description of this Utah BYU rivalry. I think a lot of people who are maybe maybe casual sports fans is the right terminology, but a lot of people underestimate the hatred, and I don't think that's too strong of a word between these two
No.
schools, the disdain for one another. This is one of the most powerful rivalries in all of college sports, and a lot of people maybe don't recognize that. So I understand where you're coming from. This is a Utah team that upset TCU. I talked about it a little bit earlier in this podcast, upset TCU there in Salt Lake City, 82-79 this past weekend as a 4.5-point home underdog. They did play BYU tied in the first meeting, but other than that, there hadn't been a whole lot of bright spots for the Utes this season to this point. This is a BYU team that obviously plays fast. They average almost 87 points a game, and I can certainly see the Cougars not electing to take their foot off the gas, if you will. If they've got the Utes down by 15, the next point, they'll be hoping to have them down by 20 or more. So I don't think they'll have any pity on the rival. And I'm like you. I don't like to lay the big points, but yeah, I wouldn't want to take Utah here either. But good luck to you on BYU there, and they're certainly capable of scoring 95 or busting 100 in this game.
All right. We do it every Tuesday and Thursday with college basketball as we transition from college football to college basketball. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott on the College Sports Rush YouTube channel, brought to you by our friends at Bet Rivers.